Hi there, Elevated Planet community. This is John Drew from Elevated Planet, and today I'm with Aoibhinn Murray. Hi there, Aoibhinn. How are you doing?
I'm brilliant. Thanks, John. How are you?
Fantastic. Thank you. I am. And I've been looking forward to this conversation ever since we did our first In Conversation With episode going back a few months ago. I've been fascinated because I know that the reason we said that we were going to do this was because you started giving us some information there about the shadow aspects, which are important to know, albeit, as we've discussed, it's like an energy thing as well to be aware of how to handle that. I remember last time it was revelation of the method was part of that.
Yeah. So we were talking about how the dark can infiltrate and has infiltrated the planet for a very, very long time, and how they use various techniques to garner energy and to garner focus. So one of the things, just to recap, is the nightly news or even social media and mainstream media. They will use shocking images to put you into shock. That then creates a certain energetic frequency, and that will help them to direct your focus into what they actually want you to focus on. Now, that can then determine the outcome of the creation of a timeline. So if they want to create a specific timeline, they want to create a specific belief, they will put the imagery out, put the public into shock, put the public into crisis and fear, garner that energy, but also manipulate the mindset as well to those who maybe aren't impervious to it, who don't see what's going on, which tends to be the majority out there, and manipulate the masses into the creation of the timeline they want to manifest in the world. So that's called revelation of the method, and it's usually used by the dark. So the dark and the light are on this planet, and we as a species and as a planet, we have been unaware of our light for such a long time. We've been really, really unaware of our power for a long time. So we have a veil of forgetfulness, which we pass through each time we incarnate, and that allows us to experience, for example, suffering, which is necessary. So the one, which has created the all, and because we're part of that, so we are a fragment of the one, and the one wants to understand itself. The one wants to experience itself through individuation, and we're part of that. So everything that's out there is part of the one, and we are always trying to get back up into a higher frequency again. So the planet Earth has been somewhat of an experiment with this, because there aren't many planets, as far as I'm aware, where the species are unaware of their own inner light and unaware of where they actually come from, their own source. We became so dark and we became infiltrated. We were meant to be guarded. We were meant to have a guardian around us. Unfortunately, these guardians had to leave because they had issues with their own systems and they needed to go, and we got infiltrated by entities that can't receive source energy for their development, for their food, to keep themselves sustained. So they need to use the energy that comes from the frequency of fear and crisis and all that stuff that comes from us reacting as humans. So they have had to keep us in a very low frequency. So we have been kept in that low frequency for a very long time, because we already started off as a planet that the species were unaware of who they actually are.
Right.
And they then came in and infiltrated and kept that going, kept that momentum going through politics, through religions, through education, through medicines, So the dark has infiltrated every aspect of society, and we also have dark in us.
Yes.
But we are always trying to develop into the light. If you think of spirituality as a spectrum, and you have the light at one end, and you have the dark at the other end. The light can feed from its own expansion, and it grows, and we grow from that. The dark can't. It doesn't have that source. So the dark can only gain territory and try coming up the scale and gain a bit more territory, And we gain expansion with the light. The dark gains power. We gain expansion and power, but the dark can't gain expansion. It can't gain the same development and the same growth of spirit. So it needs to take it. So it needs to infiltrate in order to take that.
Okay. So in terms of the fear creation thing that goes on, they actually, are we saying that they actually feed from the fear that they actually create?
Yeah.
That's how it works. You know, my partner, she struggled for at least a decade where she was getting this kind of like a demonic attack kind of thing going on at nights, which was really, really, I mean, horrible. And it was, every time it was dark, this thing would just happen. Not every time, but much of the time. And it created this fear. And I said to her, like, you know, I didn't know her a lot of the time when this was starting out. And eventually we did get a clearing through Jolie in California, did a healing for her, and actually managed to clear it for the first time, but actually managed to find the source of the issue and then put a blessing around the apartment to stop and everything she needed to do. I mean, obviously Jolie understands this far better than I do, but whatever it is, it worked. Now, I remember when I was talking to my partner about this, and she'd explained this to me. She said, well, I'm sure I've found out somewhere that, you know, that these demonic energies, they feed off your fear. So the more frightened you are, the more you're feeding them. And that's why this happens in the way it does. And I couldn't work out for the life of me where I thought it. And then I burst out laughing because I thought, I know, it was Monsters, Inc. It was okay, revelation of the method through a cartoon, but it wasn't just there because I've read it in books as well. But it was funny that Monsters, Inc. was actually just the thing that made kids scream, like being the monsters in the cupboard kind of thing, and that created power for the world in which everybody lived. And it was like, you know, when you start to think about this stuff, it is weird. I mean, I know that's a little bit off the beaten track, but you know, there are entities out there. And can I just ask you, you know, you said that this energy effectively came to Earth and it's been here for a long time. Is this an otherworldly kind of energy that's come in here to sort of infiltrate, you know, hundreds of years, thousands of years ago, whatever it was?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And I wouldn't have really believed it if I hadn't had the experiences that I had over the last few years, and then from trying to figure out what had actually happened to me, brought me to a lot of information, which I really worked with, and a lot of research. But then I went into my own heart portal and took what resonated and dumped the rest, because there's a lot of information out there. Some of it is accurate, some of it is very distorted, both intentionally and unintentionally.
Yes.
So, I mean, we can't blame everybody who brings information through, maybe from channeling. They may have been infiltrated. That's why channeling is really, it has to be done in such a secure way. So you know who you're channeling, and you know what you're channeling, you know what their history is. You don't just allow anything to come in. It's like going to bed at night, opening your front door and just thinking, well, you know, somebody may come in, somebody may not. And I'm sure they're all going to be grand. You know, they won't burgle me. You know, you have to be, you really have to be less naive than we have been up until this point. But coming back to what you're saying, yes. So we have become very much aware over the last X amount of time, particularly the last 20 years. It's been much more of a focus, really. Well, really, I suppose from the 90s onwards, the different types of species that are out there aside from us. And just like you have good humans and you have not so nice humans, we have different species, different entities out there that are not from, say, the spiritual realm, because we have nice entities from the spiritual realm, from the lower fourth, density from the lower fourth astral realm. And we have not so nice ones. And with the same with our off-planet brothers and sisters, we have some very helpful ones, and so, you know, some who have their own agendas as well.
Yes.
Even though they might be from a higher density of understanding and a higher density of consciousness, doesn't necessarily mean that they may have developed technologically speaking to a vast degree, but they may not have gone down the path of the light.
Yes.
So if they have, and that's okay, because that's the spiritual path. You can choose the light or you can choose the dark. But if they've gone down the dark path, then their soul is going to see that through until they come to a point where they can't go any further. Say when they get to the sixth density, where they can't go any further in their growth. So they have to reintegrate again and maybe go down the light path, because if they want to get to the higher densities, they have to do that. But Source then has had that experience, had that contrast, and that's what Source, that's what the all and the one wants from this, is to have as many different experiences as possible.
Yeah. And that's the curious thing about it, isn't it? Because this is why they talk about being slow to judge. Yeah. Because everything is about experience. And here we are on this great experimental planet. And this is the thing. And I've read this. I've got a couple of dozen books down there which talk about this, in terms of the fact that, you know, we've lived time and again through various iterations, various incarnations, not necessarily on this planet, but for the most part, a lot of us will have been on this planet numerous times. But the thing is the veil of forgetfulness, the whole thing. This is kind of one of the very few incarnations you can have where you forget everything at birth, where you come from a place of love, but then you come out into the world. And you can have some wonderful experiences, obviously, because, you know, if you've got loving parents and people around you who care, then that can become a loving, nurturing kind of thing. But then you're getting programmed and conditioned by this version of life that's been put together, often by those who do not have our best intentions at heart.
Yeah.
All designed at keeping us small rather than allowing us to expand outwards. Now, that said, we have a choice. As you say, that's the interesting thing. You could choose to follow the dark path, or you can choose to go towards the light and enjoy the expansion that brings. But we're also talking about, and we did touch on this last time, about this kind of split that is taking place on the planet, where at some point people will have to make a decision about which direction they're going in, because there's this third dimensional kind of structure over here, which is like the low densities. And then you've got the intended fifth dimensional kind of path, which is on the light side. Does that sound correct to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what Dolores Cannon called the new earth, you know, and we've seen that picture before of the two earths, and they're starting to split. Yes. So really we're in that at the moment. We're really in that, and everything has really sped up quite a lot because of the infiltration. We should really have maybe another 1,000 years of this change into the ascension, but we've run out of time.
Right.
We've run out of time. So everything is going very, very, very fast now to get us where we need to be. So you're going to see people, and we are seeing it, we are seeing people going down the ascension path and the light path, and working on themselves and on purging their issues, and cleaning up their life, becoming more kind of virtuous, if you like, and being drawn down that. And then there's the ones who maybe are not really connected with their heart, and yes. That's where the weakness lies, because they can be easily drawn into the dark. And we're seeing that at the moment. We can see that playing out on the planet. We're seeing that with transhumanism is one agenda, and then there's the natural growth and development of humans, the organic development of humans, which is the ascension. So we have a group of people who believe that we need to put bits and pieces inside a human being in order to raise the consciousness of that human being. No, we don't. That is the satanic timeline. That is the timeline. And then we're seeing the beginning of that, and we're seeing the satanic aspect of that with children. Now, a lot of us know what's been happening with the children for years, but the new thing with the kids is the transgender stuff that's going on. That's fine if you're an adult, but they're really trying to drive it now towards the kids. They're trying to bring it into education, particularly in America, and into the schools, to normalize you choosing your sex at the age of 5 or choosing your gender at the age of 5. And, you know, we can see that this is the beginning of the transhumanism movement, starting with this. So if you condition people at this level to start changing their physical form, and you get them into that mindset that this is normal and this is okay, particularly if you're targeting the little ones, because then they're growing up thinking this is completely normal. Allow them to grow up and become teenagers and beyond, and let them make their own decisions then. But don't start enforcing it on the little ones now, as we are seeing happening with parents. You know, I mean, it's so dark.
Yes.
And these people think that they're very righteous.
Yes.
You know, and this is where it's so insidious. And when you stand back and you watch it and you think, wow, this is so slick. This whole operation is so slick.
It's
you know,
incredible. It is incredible. And this is one of the things that, I mean, I've certainly read about, is that another antichrist on the way, which, you know, like is already out there, but invisible at this point in time, if you like, to us. In terms of a lot of the darker energies out there, they're not the people that you know about already. Typically, you know, they tend to be the ones who are in the shadows, and that's deliberately in the shadows, pulling the strings from wherever they are, and they're enormously powerful because they do understand exactly how to play this game, way more than us, like in the mainstream, or, you know, just so like junior spiritual kind of thing. I mean, you thankfully, you've got your finger on the pulse of what is going on, and it's important, so you get to see it. But yeah, it's this idea of, because what I read, I mean, and again, this is coming back to the Dolores Cannon stuff, and this is through various channeled work over many decades. And Dolores herself, basically, she passed away in 2014, so this is not new information. But the new Antichrist, the whole principle was that you would be each have a mark. You would have a mark, which would be a series of numbers, which would be, you know, like on the forehead. If you're very important, then you're on the forehead. So wherever you go, you can just be read immediately. And you can't see the mark. It's not like a tattoo. It's only a machine that can read this. Or it could be on the back of your hand or on your arm. I think it's something like that. And the whole principle is that you'll be able to go to a grocery store, and you don't even need to have a card. You don't need to have anything. All they'll do is they'll read your number, and straight away it's paid for. And then there's going to be this wonderful world that is built around this. But the word was that this builds up so much popularity because of the young generation who have been brought into this and support it because of the way they've been groomed to believe.
Yes, and groomed, that's the right word, groomed. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's more of the division taking place. This is how insidious it is. I mean, the dark does not mind waiting for generation upon generation down the line. So, you know, this is how important it is to be aware of this stuff that's going on around you, and not by default be sucked into it.
Yes.
You know, do your research, but do your own inner work as well, so you're not getting triggered by
that's
this or that.
That's an enormously powerful point as well, because this is, as I understand it, like for spiritual growth and things, you know, the temptation is to say, okay, right, I'm going to go out and heal the world, right? Whereas in reality, what you have to do is heal yourself.
Yeah.
Right? To be as good as you can be, so that you can live with that degree of joy and fearlessness and all the rest of it, so that you can then be a beacon for those around you. You know, positive energy. And yes, you can tell your truth. Absolutely, you can tell your truth, but you don't impose it on people, because again, it has to be up to the individual to make their own decision. It's a free will planet. Now, obviously, the darker forces out there are actually doing the grooming of society to try and get things the way they want it. But the truth of it is that we have to go within, right, into our, how would you call it, the higher self, our team, and access that to realize our true power. And the fact is, we don't need to be drawn into this.
Yeah, and if something feels off with you, there's a reason why it feels off. So look into it deeper, look into it more. And I'm really resonating with what you're saying there, because for the first time, spirituality, the light, is coming out of its infancy on this planet and is maturing, because we were single flames that were easily put out, or we weren't anything to be worried about, but for the first time ever in the history of this planet, all of those single flames now, the light, they're all coming together, and we're seeing the light communities coming together, and we're forming a massive force, something really to be reckoned with, and that's never happened before. And because we're coming out of this juvenile way of looking at spirituality, it's all love and fluffy bunnies and all that stuff, we're actually stepping into our warrior aspects now, as well as our love and healing and that. But simply because you love, you feel love and you want to give love, it doesn't mean that you allow people to step on you, because you must love yourself also.
Yes.
And must love your own boundaries, put your boundaries there. So it's not about loving everybody else, because then you're abandoning yourself. Yes. You're abandoning your own needs. So you must also find a balance with loving yourself and saying, you know what, that's not for me, and I don't partake in that, and being okay with that, because we're not at that point in our growth anymore where we can just, oh, it's all love and light and it's all for the highest good. It's like, well, you know what, we came here for a job. We came here to make sure that this change happens, because it's gone way too far.
Yes.
And we've been working up, every lifetime has been working up to this one that we're in now.
I know.
So this is the big one.
This is it's a privilege to be here now, because we are, and again, this is kind of the bizarre thing, because I think that we're going to be in for a very rough ride for these next few years. But this is going to develop. It's going to get deeper. It's going to get more. I think there's so much going to be to cope with. But actually, we were falling over ourselves to be here for this journey.
Yeah.
There's a lot of interest on what's going on the planet right now. And coming back to your point, the community consciousness of those flames, right, joined together, can be an enormously powerful thing. And that's what I got out of it as well. You have to work on yourself. You have to have your self-love in place. You have to have your boundaries. You have to understand what's going on. But you come together with people, like-minded people. And again, this is one of the ethos when it comes to Elevated Planet, creating the new. Don't fight the old, create the new. Just help people to awaken. It is up to the individual to awaken and to understand. But also then, as we come together as a community, that is when we can really shift things, because it's kind of like, you don't, if you have 10 people come together, it's not 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 equals 10. It's actually 10 times 10. It's 100. It's the power of 100, because everything squares. And therefore, the more you get people, contemplating this and fighting, like, as you say, from a warrior perspective, for the light, to expand this consciousness out there, which is based on love, which is based on all the joyous stuff. But as you say, being mindful that this is a war on consciousness right now, right? There's the dark side, then there's the light, and you have to make a choice at some point. Do you get drawn in? And there will be those who get drawn into the darkness because they can't release themselves from the programming and conditioning. They've lived with it for decades. They can't get their head around the fact that there is an alternative. That is reality. And I that, and again, no judgment, because everything is experience. To your point you made earlier, it's kind of like, this is bizarre, because you would say, okay, well, the darkness is bad, the light is good. But everything is about the experience of the the creator, if you like, the source of everything, the bit that we came from, but also that's where the dark side came from too.
Yeah, exactly. The great thing about it is we have the ability to go into the heart chakra. So this stuff only works if you are sitting in your first three chakras, the three lower chakras that are connected to the earth in a very fundamental way. Because when you start working in the portal of your heart and start working through that, the dark cannot get in there. It has to try. This is another reason for the suppression of people, is to keep them in fear so they can't get into the heart. Keep them suppressed so they can't get into the heart. Because once you get into the heart, you've gone to a level above what's playing out. Right. And you can see very, very, very clearly what's happening around you.
Yes.
Yeah. And this is the same with, you were talking about your partner.
Yes.
And these entities from the lower astral realm, what Rudolf Steiner would have called the eighth sphere, they are closest to us, to the planet now and to this realm, than they have ever been in the history of our species. And they will try to keep, particularly from my experience, they try to attack the light workers. And from my experience, I started experiencing them when I was very, very young. So my first experience of them was from age 5, and I only remembered it through hypnotherapy.
Right.
I was having a session for insomnia, because sleeping had always been an issue for me. And I used to scream the house down when I was a little child. I used to scream the house down every night because I didn't want to go to bed. So when I had the hypnosis and I traced everything right back, it traced it right back to the age of 5. And it was because of the experiences I started having then with these entities. And because I didn't know I had mediumship abilities at that point. And this is a tip for the parents out there. If you have a son or a daughter who's having a lot of fear at night, particularly night terrors, don't dismiss that they are, because it could be that they are actually experiencing things, but they don't have the experience to know, they don't have the training to know that they're actually experiencing real entities. Because once you have that ability, or you are a very strong light worker, a very strong healer, you shine in the non-physical world. So you attract the attention of very benevolent helpers and guides. You also attract the attention of nefarious ones too. And this is where guarding ourselves is important, because from my own experience and from learning over a period of time how to stop the attacks, I came to the conclusion it was because there was some sort of sabotage that was being attempted there to stop me doing the work that I didn't know I was here to do at that time. I've only known in the past few years. Okay, I knew I was here for a reason. I knew I'd been going through all this spiritual training for 30 years for a reason. Okay, now it's been given to me. I know what it is. But at the time, you don't know that. So all you know is you're going into fear. You might be having very physical experiences, which I was having, and your partner may have had that as well.
Yes.
And it's very frightening when you have no point of reference for this, and it can be going on for 20 or 30 years. Now, I also feel that I chose to have those experiences, and your partner may have chosen to have those experiences before she incarnated, so she could learn how to be sovereign, because that's what I learned from it. Once I learned how to actually stop this thing of sending them love,
yes,
and forming a cord with them, and stop going into fear, because they feed on that and they get bigger, and they know that they can manipulate you so easily. Once, the first time I shouted at one of these things and I said, no, this is my realm, you get out of this room and you do not come back. And then it stopped. I was like, oh my God, that worked. So then I started adding more, and then I started creating a declaration for myself at night. And since I started using declarations at night to stop the interference happening, there's only been one time since then that I felt one of them latching onto my back. I was turned on my side in bed, and my husband wasn't there at the time, and I was turned on my back and I was awake. And I felt that familiar feeling of physical connection on my back, a physical being on my back. And instead of going into fear, I went into anger, but I couldn't get myself out of the paralysis. I don't know what you'd call it, but I practiced it enough over the last few years to know that if I'm shouting it enough in my mind, I can make my physical mouth work. So I started roaring in my mind, no, no. And I started actually being very abusive, saying, off.
Yeah.
And as soon as I got the words out, I felt it withdrawing, pulling away from my back. And it hasn't happened since then, because I keep very strong boundaries. So it's not about being fearful, because a lot of light workers think that you're being fearful if you're putting a guard around yourself. You know, you're saying, this is my space, this is my territory. You do not overstep this territory. And this is what I mean about coming more into our adulthood as spiritual workers, rather than just, it's all love and light. And, you know, this stuff doesn't, if I don't look at it, it doesn't happen. I didn't look at it at the age of 5. It happened for years. You know, I was brought up in the Catholic Church. So, you know, I was brought up in a religion. So you would think that it shouldn't happen in that case. So I think we have to be a bit more mature at this point.
Yes, I mean, that's a really good point. I mean, I think it's Jolie said to me before, critters are attracted towards the light, right? That's kind of, which is exactly the point you make, right?
I would totally agree with her. Yeah.
And it's something that I have learned to do for myself. And I don't believe I've ever been under any such attack as my partner has. But she does this as well, which is surrounds herself with light, you know, on a regular basis. And again, it's just you know, your own little visual thing, and you're actually saying it and you're feeling it, and it can actually create this, you know, boundary. And it's like I have this thing where I think of this white pyramid of protection, right? It's a white pyramid of protection and only allows the light in, and that's kind of the way I feel about that. Now, I'm not like my partner. I've never been, or like you, I have never been sort of through one of those kind of experiences that I have an awareness of. Who knows, if I have some regression therapy, maybe I'll find out otherwise, but I'm not familiar with that. But I think what was really interesting, we mentioned Dolores Cannon earlier. And what she would do was the regression therapy, and she would dig into people's past lives, but also a myriad of other things that came through during the decades that she did this. But there was one entity in particular who was very dark. I mean, the darkest she'd ever come across. But it wasn't, you know, obviously the fellow who was under hypnosis was the one who was effectively in the room with this man, who just felt like pure evil. That was, and this is not typical, because her work this is the only time I've ever seen this within all these books that she's ever written. So it's not like she's writing a horror story. This is kind of for real. All she ever did was recorded verbatim what happened. And she had a recorder running, so she would actually literally do it verbatim. And on this particular case, before she went in, she was smart enough to give everybody protection. So before she sent this fellow, whose name was John, off on this journey, she gave him the protection, and she gave other people the protection that were around. She forgot to give herself protection, right? She'd been told that she should always give herself protection. So even though he was the spirit who was effectively in the room, in a physical room with someone somewhere else in the world, halfway around the world from where they were, in a physical room, but he could feel the evil. And that spirit knew he was there. That the man concerned, who was a physical person, knew he was there, because he's very, very wise to this stuff. But he couldn't see him at the time, but he knew he was there, and he had to back away because but Dolores Cannon, who was just there recording this and asking the questions, she got the jolt. She was the one who got physically attacked in the chair, pushed back. So from half a world away, she was on, and it's the only time it ever happened, and she never forgot to put the protection on her ever again. But that was it. She said that was the answer. There was like she had to protect herself, and that one time she didn't, when there was this really dark presence, super dark presence, then she really, I mean, she physically felt that for a long time afterwards and would never forget it for the rest of her life. But yeah, and even after that, the fellow who was concerned, this entity was then trying to get to him, but never could, because he was always protecting himself after that. But he had to do it. But effectively, it kind of created a wall around him. He even kind of woke up. It felt like he was awake, but he was asleep. But he could see this man trying to get in and work out how to get in. But he knew the reason he couldn't get in was because of the barrier that he had created around himself. And I know this sounds like, I mean, you get it, I get it. And, you know, a lot of people who've been looking at this stuff do understand that. But obviously, from a mainstream perspective, it all sounds a little bit fantastical, you know, creating a barrier just through your thought and your heart, you know, working together. And I think that's another point that I was going to mention as well. You talk about the heart as the portal, right? It's the motherboard of the body, if you like, and the connection to so many things. But having the heart-mind coherence, I hear a lot of talk around that, about the importance of that, working together as a unit. So like, because we so, again, a lot of us left brainers, kind of, we live in the mind, and that was part of my world for many decades. It not allowing enough of the right brain through, but then learning that actually, yeah, the heart is very important, but having the connection, heart-mind connection, you can work on that.
Absolutely. And for anybody who doesn't have any information about this, just look up the HeartMath Institute. They've been doing this, working with the science of this for years and years. So you can do your own research into it and find out that it's very, very, very real. And when you have the two aligned, the mind and the heart, you are a force to be reckoned with. You really are. But you know, you make a good point there with the conditioning to be very in the kind of the left brain and staying very logically minded. And there is a challenge for a lot of people, myself included, when I started off because of my own conditioning. But it comes with, you learn about your power through experiencing it. So I would suggest that even if you don't believe in this stuff, just pretend for 5 minutes that it's real. And whatever intuitive instincts you get coming in, go with it just once. See what happens. And the more you do that, the more you actually see the proof. See, this is all experiential. You can't read, I mean, you can read this from a book, but it has to be, it can't just be a concept. It has to be experienced by the individual, because that's where the proof lies. And people are so incredibly powerful, and that it has been trained out of them from the year dot, from the time that they're born. Like I said, it's a very slick operation on this planet. So it's conditioned out of you from the time that you arrive onto the planet, your own power, and you're put into various different systems, and you must follow these systems. And when you start working with those higher aspects of yourself, and you start getting dividends from it, you start benefiting from it, and you start seeing that this actually works, it gets stronger. It's like a muscle. You have to flex it, and you have to use it in order for it to work. And it does take practice. But when you see it the first time, you see it and you realize, gosh, this is real. You see it working in your own life, then that inspires you to keep going, And that's when you start learning about the power that humanity has. And that's why humanity has had to be dumbed down for such a long time, because we are such powerful beings.
Yes.
The only way to control us is to put fluoride in our water, to keep our pineal gland messed up, and to keep our intuition messed up, to keep us dumbed down, keep us in all these systems, keep us divided. You must believe this, and these people have to hate these people have to hate these people. And it always amazes me how people can't see the ones behind them that are giving them the rockets to throw at each other, you know.
Yes.
It still amazes me, but it is the way it is.
Yeah. And again, it just shows how slick the operation is, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because it kind of even begins like at an educational level. The way we're taught, the way that we're programmed effectively to perpetrate the world that's being created around us, and to believe that this is it, and this is the way it is. But, you know, everything's logical, everything's, you know, and they do encourage creativity, because I mean, to me, creativity is a door to some of this stuff as well.
Hugely.
Yeah. And by accessing the creativity within, accessing the inner child is something that gets talked about a lot.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And that creativity, you'll often find that people who are spiritual practitioners are also quite creative as well, you know, because as you say, like the two of them go hand in hand, because that creative flow is coming through the heart, it's coming through the sacral chakra, it's coming, you know, it's coming through the soul out into the world. But they would only allow a certain amount of creativity. You know, they would have allowed, you know, the darker ones would have allowed a certain amount, as long as it's controllable. You know, what's happening now is we are becoming so strong, and we're going to continue becoming stronger over the next decade and several decades as we continue to ascend and evolve. And that'll get stronger and stronger and stronger until these other entities who latch on to humans, because these beings can't incarnate. The dark can't incarnate. It can only attach itself to an incarnated being from the light. So if you're incarnated like we are from the light. They can only infiltrate because they can't create. That's why they have to copy us.
Like a parasite kind of thing.
Exactly. Parasites, exactly. Living off the energy of others because they can't, they're so disconnected from their heart that they can't actually use it anymore. Or they're so disconnected from source, from the one. They can't access what we can access. We can access that creativity. We can access that force, that energy. They can only copy what we create.
Yes. You know, these fourth dimensional beings, which I think, you know, the lower astral, which, you know, because from what I understand, and again, you'll be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but say like the astral has like 3 layers or something like that, and when you die, you cross over and you go to the upper astral, which is kind of like, you know, the heaven kind of concept as we think of it. The lower astral is the one which is closest to us, right?
Yeah.
But they're still not visible to us under normal circumstances, correct?
Under normal circumstances, unless you have developed your third eye. So often a medium will see them, a healer will see them. A normal 3D person who is disconnected from their higher faculties or their higher abilities often won't see them. They might feel the energy, they might feel, but people who are working as spiritual practitioners will be able to tell that they're there or see that they're there. You know, when I work with clients, I will often see parasitic attachments that will come in and wrap themselves around the energy centers of the individual, or I've seen them wrapping around organs as well, creating illness.
Right.
And I remember when I first started seeing these years ago, and I started taking them out, and they often look like a squid or an octopus with these long tentacles. And some of them, I actually removed one today from a person's lung. And this person is very, very, very unwell. But this person also had a lot of auric wounds, which means attachments and parasites can often come in through what's called auric wounds in the auric field. So in the biomagnetic field around us, and they will latch onto the trauma, our own trauma, and they will exacerbate that trauma, and they will either create an illness, or they'll create an addiction, or they'll create depression, or whatever it might be, because the energy from those lower frequencies feed the entity. So the one that I removed today, they look very small when they're in the body, and when you pull them out of the body, they get really, really big. This one, all I saw was a face. And it was only when I was being pulled back to the lungs, I was saying to myself, why do I keep getting pulled to the lungs? There isn't an issue with the lungs as far as I'm aware. And then towards the end, when I was scanning the aura, and I brought back to the lung again, and I saw the entity, and I saw the face of the entity, and I was like, okay, it's a parasite. So you need to pull that out. And once it was pulled out, it was really, really big. And then I sent that off to be dealt with by spirit and by my spirit team that I work with. So this is the importance. This is how important it is to take care of our auric field, because people aren't educated about this. And that's another thing. we have been especially not educated, because
exactly.
these things are simple. I was saying to this woman today, I'm going to give you a technique for scanning your own aura so you can see if anything happens going forward, and a couple of other techniques. Because once a person knows how to do it, it's very simple. Mm-hmm. Most things in the spiritual field are very simple. It's just that the information is withheld because it empowers you.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. And it's kind of like, you know, most people out there, again, mainstream type of thing, and I would have classified myself as this just 4 years ago. I could never make sense of the idea of chakras, of energy body. I'm a physical body. That's me, right? That was the way I looked at life. And there wasn't anything beyond that. There was no energy body. There was no auric body. There was no astral body. Yet it is. It's all part of me, as well as the team that works with me. And it's the guides and it's the higher self. And it is fantastic. And I love that. But I mean, that would have seemed like sheer fantasy 5 years ago to me. And what you say makes absolute sense, because this is how we're educated. This is part of the programming and conditioning. This is us. We need to be fearful. Death is the end. And therefore, all these horrible things can go wrong with us. And then we have doctors, we have hospitals. And yes, they absolutely do a fantastic job. There's far better natural remedies out there that don't do the damage that the pharmaceutical kind of products do. But it's all designed to keep us small, because, and I think this is a point that you made going back previously to me, was that you foresaw a time that, I don't know whether it was another decade or something like that, that healers of your ilk would be on every street corner, because people by then would have realized that this is the truth and that you can take control with practitioners to help, right, to guide the way, because everybody has a role out there in life. You're a healer. You're a healer and an educator, along with, you know, connection to our galactic friends as well. So you're very multifaceted there, Aoibhinn. But nevertheless, there's a lot of people out there who have healing abilities that come in a variety of methodologies, but don't fit with mainstream reality.
Exactly. There's one group, I don't know if I mentioned this before, when the COVID obsession, and I specifically call it an obsession, when the COVID obsession was going on, so many people decided to leave mainstream. So doctors, nurses, teachers, and various different people who were seeing what was going on, who, you know, were being threatened with job losses and being threatened to be X, Y, and Z is going to happen to you if you don't comply and give this thing to your patients and all of that. And they were seeing the damage it was doing then. I mean, obviously it's starting to come out in the mainstream now, but a lot of us knew what was going on back then because we could foresee it. You know, we knew this was going to happen. And we were called, you know, conspiracy theorists.
Yeah.
But anyway, it doesn't matter. So now we're seeing the likes of the PHA, the People's Health Alliance, and here in Northern Ireland, like a group that I'm in, Heal NI, that's Health, Education, Lifestyle and Agriculture, Northern Ireland. And these are people like myself who want to set up and who are setting up alternatives to the mainstream education, the mainstream medical model. And we have medical practitioners, doctors and nurses working alongside holistic practitioners like myself, you know, and charging either nothing or very little for their services, so people can get the best of what they need, and they don't have to be forced to do something they don't want to do, or they want to go down a very different route, a holistic route. They want to maybe go down the route of homeopathy. They want to try that. But that might be a bit outside of the price range. So now they're able to try it. So we're seeing these hubs being set up in different countries now. So it's beginning at the roots. And we always said that it has to begin at roots level. It has to come from the people. It can't come from the top down anymore, because that's the way it's always come. And that's where the power and corruption, or power with corruption, comes from. So we're bringing it from the roots up this time. And it's wonderful to see it happening.
Yes, and that's a point which Dr. Stephen Greer has made as well on numerous occasions over in America. It's, you know, it is we the people that will make the changes, because once you've got government involvement, you've got distortion, you've got, you know, again, just the same old story. repeating itself, and it's all about power playing itself out. And I've seen that the same in this country. I mean, since you mentioned that, I know that one of my friends who is in a similar line of work to you, but he does a lot of corporate work as well. So he kind of keeps a lot of his spiritual side of things a little bit smaller, because that tends to put the corporate world off. But he's very, he knows his stuff. But he's joined a similar organization over here where, people who got genuine skills to bring to humanity can do so outside of the normal framework. And start to kind of create an alternative structure which will help mankind in future, because I do think things they're not great at the moment, but I do believe they're going to get worse. And it's going to be a struggle for many people, but at the same time, this is how it is supposed to play out. And this is often, from crisis comes new beginnings.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
It encourages people to kind of look for the alternatives, and you have to choose your alternative.
And the systems, they're not going, you don't go to bed one night with one system and wake up the next day with a brand new shiny system. They have to be brought down and they have to be dismantled. And this is what you're rightly saying. We are kind of in now, and we're going to see we've seen tons and tons of mudslinging, and these systems have to be changed bit by bit, but in saying that, quite fast at the same time. And these other systems that we're bringing in that are holistic are getting ready to be part of that change. So we're getting rid of the old systems completely, because they don't serve humankind at all. No. They really don't. And yeah, it is going to be difficult, but depends on what timeline you're choosing though, John, because if you are a starseed, or you're a light worker or a light bearer or a warrior, you are most likely, if you've been on the path for a while and you've been preparing for this and you've done a lot of the inner work already, you're not going to be as traumatized as somebody who's just waking up for the first time, because God help them, they have to get up to speed very fast, and they have so much trauma that they're dealing with, so they can purge it. But when you're working at that level, you're not in the 3D level. You're not operating in the 3D level anymore. So we're going to have, this is what I think we're going to have, these two timelines playing out simultaneously. And the ones who are on the level, the 5D timeline, are just not going to be aware of what's going on down here, or are going to be a little bit aware of it, but not pulled into it. And I tell you, it's not that difficult.
I know.
It really isn't, because all I had to do was stop watching television and stop reading newspapers. That was it.
And it's a crazy thing, but absolutely, that made a huge difference to me. Yeah. When I was going back to the time when I had the day job in the finance industry, it was important that I had my finger on the pulse of everything going on in the world of finance, everything going on in the news, because it affected what was going on in the markets that my clients were affected by in turn. So it kept you in that loop. But the more I looked into this, the more I realized how much distortion there was in this, and stepping away from it is kind of like, wow, the world is so much better and so much lighter, that once you switch off that nonsense that kind of is constantly thrown at you, and again, trying to put you into the fear response, the stress response, the hate response, the division energy is so blatant. We come from the same source, we go back to the same source. No one of us is better than anybody else, but we have a choice about the sense of the direction that we take, personal responsibility to decide how we want to move forward. But it comes down to this thing, which is the Great Awakening, which is now. And people will make their own choice about whether they want to be part of the Great Awakening, or whether they have concrete walls around their version of reality and cannot get out of it, which is fine, because that is the right path for them. But it's wonderful to think that we may be able to help people to look at things differently. That's all, just planting the seeds and let them work it out for themselves. And if we can keep putting information out there and be a conduit, and anybody who ever wants to ask any questions based off this stuff that we put out, I would welcome you to contact Elevated Planet. We're very accessible, elevatedplanet.life. You can send any questions you like. And, whether they'd be for Aoibhinn, whether they'd be for Jolie, whether they'd be for me, whatever, it doesn't matter. Or any just general questions, because I'd love to. This is a community, and it's a community forum. So to have a community, you've got to have, it's not just us putting information out there, it's encouraging people to come back and feed information back in as well, whether that's questions, points to be made, or whatever. Anyway, Aoibhinn, I've kept you for long enough. This has been really fascinating. I learn so much every time. And I've got my own reference points on many of these things, but your experiences are so much deeper. Your knowledges are so much deeper. And I really do value this. And for our community, and again, I understand many will see it just as fantastical and maybe a little bit too far away, but this is just planting the seeds. And if at some point this starts to resonate, because you start to see the community around you and the world around you start to disintegrate rather than to form into the world that you really want to live in, to my mind, having come out of the mainstream 4.5 years ago, I can kind of say that it was the best thing that I ever did to be able to really tap into this light side of things, because it makes life a joy. And despite, I still have the same pressures as everybody else. You still got to pay the bills, and they're going up all the time, and there's all the stresses and strains involved with that. But do I really feel stresses and strains? Not so much, because I know that everything's going to be good.
Yeah, and nobody's telling you what to think either. You don't have to turn on the TV to listen to somebody tell you this is what you're meant to think now. Actually, that's what it's like. MK Ultra never went away. To God. And then people get triggered, and I did see that a lot during the COVID obsession. Because my husband would tell me what was going on. So if I wanted to go somewhere, and he would say, well, okay, well, you can go there, but they're not letting people into that place there, and you're meant to wear something on your face. And I'm, well, no, I won't be going there. And there was all this stuff, right? So he kind of kept me abreast of what was happening in the world, but apart from that, I hadn't a clue. And it was the best thing ever. But what I did notice was I really became aware when I would notice that there were peaks and troughs. There must have been troughs with different types of information that people were being fed, because I noticed be attacked by certain people around me if I wasn't complying with the mainstream narrative. And I'd be like, why does it matter to you? You don't even live in the same country as me. Why are you so why are you so worried about what I'm doing, and why are you so fearful? And you'd see like a whole group of people, and I was like, okay, things have spiked. Okay, they're giving out these numbers again about this and in the hospital and this, that, and the other. And then people were being told that they're going to kill their family members if they don't take a particular medicine. I mean, it was just amazing. And sitting back watching this and thinking, wow, this is incredible, to be able to control the mindset of so many people and get them to attack other people.
I know. It was incredible, yeah.
Fascinating.
It really created division and hatred there.
Yeah.
People who didn't comply with what they were being told were putting everybody else at risk. That's what you were told. So therefore, that was a reason to really dislike those people who wouldn't play by the rules that were being set.
And then, even though those people were doing enough research to see, we were reading the papers from the source. We weren't hearing the third or fourth hand. We were going to the source and reading the papers and going, okay, well, this is truth, but this is what they're putting out on the news. I see. Okay. And people are just following. I was also amazed by how many people like being disempowered. I had no idea. I was so oblivious. No idea that there were so many people who actually prefer to be told what to do than take responsibility. That was an eye-opener as well. Yeah, interesting times.
Indeed, interesting is exactly what it is, but it's the reason we came here. Time is, I think, is going to be very tumultuous going forward for the next few years. I think that there is a lot of galactic activity out there from our galactic friends who are all watching at this time, because they've known for thousands of years that this time was coming up and upon us now. And I know it does sound fantastical, but this is the reason we're here. And I think it's going to be fascinating. I think it's going to be a lot of grief energy. That's what I've also been told. A lot of grief energy, because it doesn't mean necessarily that everybody's going to die, but grief energy is often a case of sometimes if something that you've always believed in is taken away from you, you're going to grieve the fact that you've been misled for your entire life. But grief is a sign also of new beginnings. So sometimes you have to go through that in order to get to the other side. So
yes, paradigms have to be shattered, and that is part of it. And of course, you're right. A lot of anger comes and a lot of grief. And how can I have believed that? And then the acceptance comes, and then we rebuild. And
yes,
we rebuild much better.
Yes,
for the people.
Yes, we do. As Socrates said, the secret of change is to focus all your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. Anyway, Aoibhinn, I just want to say thank you. It's been fascinating and enlightening. And I'd like to think that, again, there's going to be further follow-ups to this, because I think as the world shifts and things change, this is a great communication portal that we've got going here. And I really do value your insights and your wisdom.
Well, thank you. That's very, very kind. Sure, everybody'd agree with the wisdom part.
They will. Whether they agree with it right now or whether it'll be in another 2 or 3 years' time when they say, oh, she was right all along.
Well, listen, yes. It's been lovely. I've really thoroughly enjoyed the chat, and yeah, I'm happy to come back anytime.
Thank you very much, Aoibhinn. And thank you very much also to our Elevated Planet community for tuning in. And we look forward to giving you yet more fantastical tales with a savory snack sometime again in the future.